Good morning, everyone. My name is Bolaji. With me this morning, I got Sulay Jalloh, and I got two other people that we're collaborating together. They're not here at the moment. I got Dr. Bisi Monite from Murdoch University, and I also got Dr. Laulu Ibilola from University of Western Australia in Perth. And today we'll be sharing our research intent with you. We've got the ethics approval ready. We're about going to the field. I would think we should also get understanding of feedback from people about what they think about this research. So the title of the research this morning is Hear It From Horse's Mouth, Listening to African Professionals in Australia. But before I go ahead, I want to acknowledge that this presentation this morning is held on the traditional lands of the Jalloh people. Therefore, I pay my respect to elders, both past, present, as well as those that are emerging. A bit of me is here. Of course, we know quite a number of people don't really know much about what's going on in Africa. But I want to say to you that Africa is a continent, it's not just a country. And there are about 54 countries in Africa. And of course, the researchers or the investigators of this research intent are spread across the whole continent or the countries in Africa. Bolaji is my name. My first PhD is in philosophy of education. My second PhD is in policy studies. And my research interest in the area of policy, philosophy, comparative education, sociology, history and community studies, and global education. And of course, for anybody who's willing or interested in this area of research, I'm willing to work or collaborate with them in future. Again, I need to say that I'm a product of influence. So many people have contributed to my research growth and of my professional development in life. I joined the university in 2014, and I've had three legends leading the whole College of Education and providing the professional guidance, to support my research inclination. One of them is Professor Peter Kell, who also initiated me into discussing or bringing African discourse to education curriculum in Australia. And of course, followed by Lawrence Demati. I've had several PDRs report with them, and they were very supportive of me. Currently, I have Professor Shaw, who has also been very supportive. Last year, he played a host to the whole African community, having what we call the African Colloquium here at Darwin University. And not just that, I also have a group of research scholars that will come together that I'm leading here at CDU. And I have Dr. Sulay Jalloh, I have Kapana, Amanda is here, Umpo, Bopelo, Cora, and Victor Oguma. Victor Oguma recently just moved down to University of Canberra to pick up a new position there. So these are a group of people that we're working together. And if anybody wants to know what we are doing here about education, about health nexus, please you can log into the links that is available on the screen for you to get a sense of understanding of what we're doing here. I want to start this presentation by acknowledging that the policy of 1960, that is the migration policy that gave the opportunity to African and to other people to migrate to Australia, to make Australia their home, really provided the opportunity for the African migrants to come into Australia. And of course, there are several pathways through which people came into Australia, but the two ones that the last probably a decade that brought in people to Australia, one was through the humanitarian grant. And the humanitarian grant here is about people who had what we call political unrest or victimizations, or people who had what we call civil war and all that from Africa. They brought them to Australia, and they've made Australia their home. And the second group of people who have been coming in since 2007 are the Africans who came in through skill migration. There are several visa categories in that space as well that helped people to come into Australia. And the whole essence of their coming to Australia was for them to flourish their career engage constructively and get the international experience that they are, advocating or craving for. And to start with again, we did a research project about 2 years ago, with including myself, Dr. Sulay Jalloh, and Dr. Kell, about looking at the African community in Northern Territory. And the research was prompted by the need and the narratives of the African leaders about why their youths are not engaging constructively in schools, and the aspiration for them to move from higher education, from secondary school to university, is not there. And if there's anything that we need to know about the African community, is the pride that we have in education. In Africa, hardly will you see a family without having a graduate or even a graduate with a PhD in the family in Africa. So why? Because the colonial legacy that was left behind by the colonial powers is the pride of education. They believe that education is the gateway to prosperity. That's why an average African parent is always striving to send their kids to university. But find out that majority of those who migrated to Australia through the humanitarian grant are having challenges with their kids, for them, with regarding them going to school and all that. So that alone pinch, the African parent against their children. And of course, that became an issue. So the initiative to engage to find out what the problem was and to provide solutions to the problem was initiated by the African leaders in the Northern Territory. And of course, we had quite a number of information from that research. We've done a publication in that space already. For anybody who's interested in reading one of the research findings, the link is there for you to log in and get the publication that we just had recently. So we leverage on that project, we leverage on what we call the traditional proverb of it takes a village, to raise a child. So that's what we explore, to understand, listening to parents about their grievances against their kids and for the lack of aspirations. We also listen to the middle school and the high school students about what they think about the uni and what they need to know about the university education. And the last group of people that we spoke to were the undergraduate in the university, to know if the level of support were provided for them to engage and to know how they are traveling well in their educational aspiration. And of course, these research findings actually necessitated that research. We read some literature, did some lot of literature exploration, and one of those was that the Africans have what we call low completion of year 12 education. And some also said that they are underrepresented in higher education. This literature informed the need for the study. And from that study, we found out that the African students, or the youth students in the community, they were disenchanted, towards higher education. And the reason that they gave about that was because their parents migrated to Australia under the skilled migration category, but unfortunately haven't gone through the rigors, the process of getting their skill recognized, assessing the agency, and of course do the English benchmark and all the other examinations to get them to Australia. But they have not been able to have what we call a good story to tell about their success, in education. And again, we believe this lack of success in post-arrival of African immigrants in Australia is a challenge, and which necessitated the need for us to come together as African scholars to research that space, to find out what the problem is and see the possibility of providing or informing policies about what they need to do to be able to get their desired jobs and work in their area of specialization. We've done quite a number of literature exegesis since in the last 1 or 2 years, we'll be looking at what literature says about this category of people coming to Australia to make Australia their home and for them to be able to work in the skill area. And all the literatures that we have looked at critically, I'll be talking about the issue of brain drain, the issue of economic reason, political instability in their country. That's what is informing people to migrate to another country. And of course, the overarching understanding of the literature is all about the economic benefits that they can get and the professional experience. It's only few literatures that talks about the language barrier. And when you look at the so-called language barrier they are talking about here, they believe it's more pronounced with the Asia continent, not with the African communities. So we want to find out if language barrier is an issue of engagement or issues that informed why people are not getting job in the skill area. For this research, we leverage on two literature, two theoretical framework. The first one is by Song, which is talking about multiculturalism. And the second one also is about Blomad, which also talking about multiculturalism in context of understanding what multiculturalism is, understanding the political philosophy, which is all about assimilation, about integration, and of course about the acceptance of the new immigrants in the society. And if you look critically at this study, the study is designed to actually leverage on this information by Song to understand what is the multiculturalism concept of Australia as a nation and how that impacts on the integrations of the new immigrants in the society. And of course, when we are talking about new immigrants here, we are also including the research focus, which is African community. So this definition has given us a range of understanding of not just understanding this new group of new migrants coming to make Australia their home, but much more to understand all those voices of the minority, the marginalized community, and of course to understand the perception of the Australian people about even the African community, including the First Nation people in Australia. So that's the reason why we believe Song theoretical framework provide a very good justification and a very good leading to understand all the research problems associated with Africans, immigrants, and why they are not getting jobs in their area of specialization. And the second theoretical framework that's guiding this study is by Blomad. He's also a very prolific scholar who's also who's in the field of multiculturalism, talking about how to ensure diversity and how diversity and integration of people in the community can bring about economic development of that nation. And of course, we want to look at that, and of course, looking at that from perspective of the multiculturalism philosophy of Australia within the perspective of diversity and of course equal opportunity given to people in Australia. So the research questions that are guiding these studies are just about three. One is to find out the reason why the African migrants are not getting jobs in their area of specializations. Why African skilled migrants who came in under skilled migrations are not working in their desired occupations, but rather they are working in what we call unskilled jobs. And number two question is to find out if the years of residence in Australia is an issue or imparting on what we call the employment opportunities for the African skilled migrants in Australia. And number three is to understand if language or skills, communication skills, have anything to do with getting jobs or getting the desirable professional jobs in that area. These are the three leading questions that are guiding this study. And what we did again was to look at the national policy agenda of multiculturalism that's been advocated in Australia, or that is distincting Australia as one of the leading multicultural society with a strong migration policy. Number one is the issue of cultural identity, which means as an Australian, you have rights and equal opportunities. You are not defined by any limitations. You are not defined by any form of barrier, including what we call language or religious barrier. We also want to pinch our research focus to align with the national agenda again about what we call social justice, to know if indeed the equality of opportunities and of course the considerations for ethnic, cultural, religious, and language barrier are not pinched against some selected group of people or minority group of people not to have a say or not to have opportunity to flourish their career in Australia. And the key point again from this national agenda is to find out if the economic efficiency in terms of maintaining, developing skills, and of course sourcing for talents for all the Australians, regardless of the background, is an issue affecting the opportunities for people in Africa to people migrated from Africa under skilled migrations to have a say. And what we did again was to do a bit of exploration of the skills area where we have majority of the African skilled migrants coming into this country. And the skilled areas involve a lot of rigorous process for you to be assessed, to be found appointable or qualified under that scheme, migration scheme, for you to come to Australia. We have quite a number of this field on the screen, and the assessing agencies that are regulating this skill assessment area. We have quite a number of Africans who are medical doctors, and you can't be a doctor to practice in Australia without going through what we call the Australian Medical Council, or what we call the AMC. And the AMC, they have quite a number of stringent conditions through which you can get your skill recognized in Australia. One, you must have a benchmark of English of 8 in highlights, which means in academic literacy, you must have minimum of 8 in all the language skills. And when we are talking about language skills here, we are talking about the productive skills and the receptive skill. We're talking about listening, speaking, reading, and writing. You must have a minimum of 8 in each of these components. In addition to that, you need to see for what we call the AMC1 examination and AMC2 exam as well. And until you finish and pass these exams successfully, before your skill can be assessed and your qualification can be assessed as comparable to Australia, and of course the experience as well. And quite a number of people have been able to go through that rigor, through that process, and at the end of the day, they're still nowhere in getting a job to become a medical doctor in Australia. And we have people who are, who are midwifery, who are in the area of nursing, also going to the same English benchmark, and of course getting the skill assessed and comparable to Australian standard. We have people who are in what we call accounting field. They do the CPA, and of course those who wants to be teachers or who are teachers who migrated to Australia also are subject to the same rigorous process. At the end of the day, we have quite a number of these people in this different field. Even the social work also have what we call the English benchmark and few other things that you need to do in terms of examination. At the end of the day, we still have people haven't gone through this process. They are still yet to get a desirable job in that area. So the question here is that despite the positive skill assessment of this this African skill migrants and these skill areas, there's still a problem with the lack of recognition professionally with their professional qualifications to be able to practice in Australia. So the problem is, what is the problem behind this issue? And those are the things we're trying to unveil to understand what we need to know and how can we support the people in this category to be able to get their desirable jobs and work in their area of specialization. So the rationale behind this study is probably to, not one of the rationale behind this study is to see how we can inspire faith in this, in the individuals who are in this area, and for them to be able to establish themselves in the skill market in Australia. And number two, we are thinking of informing policies, making policymakers and of course institutional governance to understand the barriers and the limitations that the African migrants in Australia are facing about getting jobs in that skill area. And of course, it also helps the young young scholars who are coming up to understand the multifaceted approaches and see how we can get their skill recognized in Australia. And now it's time for methodology. I will invite Dr. Sulay Jalloh to continue from this section. Thank you.
Okay. Can I thank you, Stephen, for that presentation? I think you have already done most of the work, Let me again introduce myself to our audience. My name is Sulay Jalloh, and I'm currently a lecturer here at Charles Darwin University, and I'm originally from Sierra Leone. And I would like to continue this presentation to discuss the methodology. And I don't know exactly why Stephen wants me to do this area, even though I think it's an area that perhaps we're still going to continue to get more feedback from, and I hope people who are participating online will help us with this area. If I may just repeat maybe two things that come out from Stephen's presentation, which I think is important to put into context. And that is, number one, this research primarily, as Stephen clearly mentioned, is that it came out from a previous research that we were doing with Ms. Jalloh Kell as well, who is online today, and thank you for joining us, by the way. And that was, we were trying to understand why we have low participation from students in high school and at universities. And of course, one of the findings is that some of these students were kind of disappointed that even their parents, who are well qualified in their eyes, are not in the area of employment that they are specialized into. So that basically brought us back to ask this question then, if that is the case, why these well-qualified people, and just as Stephen clearly mentioned, qualification is not the problem because they have gone through the process of assessment through the Australian Assessment Board, which is very rigorous in their approach. So qualification is not the problem. So we wanted to find out exactly what are some of the issues there. And again, we went to the literature. And so far, the literature telling us there are perhaps a number of factors. And language might be a barrier, for example. And yet, we know that through the assessment board that Australia goes through, language is one of the top area of requirement, and asking for an IELTS of 8 in most of those assessments is very high. So we cannot completely rule out language yet because we have not collected the data, and that is where this methodology comes in. Again, this methodology is part of the literature review because we wanted to see what others have done, what methodologies have they done, and what they have used in order for them to do a very effective study in this area. So it was very obvious to us from the start that using a mixed method approach, mainly qualitative and quantitative research method, will be the way to go with this one. And as I said, there were many literature review out there which support the fact that mixed method approach would be able to explain any intervention that perhaps we would want to get out of this research, and perhaps it will be able to give us a better in-depth study of these participants. So the key issue here, what we want to identify in this methodology is these enablers. So that's the key word there. So we want to understand what are the key enablers that will help African skilled migrants to benefit them and support them to gain meaningful employment in their area of specialization. So the whole idea of the methodology itself is to be able to identify some of these enablers, because we believe if we can identify some of these enablers, then we can go back to the community and present these enablers and hopefully use them as factors to intervene into helping them gain meaningful employment in their area of specialization. So how are we going about to collect participants for this study? So we intend to study at least 100 African skilled migrants. At least that is the intention, that is the aim for this study. And we are going to look at between 2007 and 2019. Now, we choose that date in particular because according to the ABS, which is the Australian Bureau of Statistics, it shows that that is an area which skill migration from Africa, spike in Australia. So we wanted to know, basically, we specially choose that area because we believe that will help us to get the number of participants that we are looking for this study. So how are we going to do that? We're going to do it through an intervention for participation through a lot of method. And with this particular community of study, it's not a very straightforward way of studying it. And I think our previous research, It Takes a Village, we have learned a lot from that research, how we go about to get participants. And we will be bringing a lot of that learning into this research as well. For example, it's going to be a combination of the use of flyers to reach these participants, but it's also going to include community consultation as well, which is one of the methods that we found was very, very helpful in the previous research, and we're going to use that as well, So here are some of the ideas that we intend to use. This idea of gatekeeper narratives, is method that have been used previously, and we find it also helpful even in our previous research. And what it is mainly is approaching the African community leaders for us to be able to pitch this idea to them. And once we get their support, then hopefully through that leaders, we will be able to reach their members, And even though there are some limitations using that methodology, but we find it very effective in reaching the participants that we want to reach. Now, another also methodology we learned from our previous research is this community congregation centers. Most African participants here in Australia, you find them mainly going to churches, mosque, and all other religious participation. So maybe those also is area that we will try to reach these participants, because we believe it's an area that which is very effective in helping us get our participants. And in quantitative terms also, participants will be asked to nominate a numerical research code, and generally this will derive from mainly asking them to select perhaps just the last 4 digits of their phone numbers, and this way it will allow them to be de-identified through the process of the research. Again, this is something that is born out from our previous research, which we learned that most of these researchers sometimes they find they are very sensitive when it comes to element of research, and especially with our previous research, it was very, very good that we had Ms. Madeleine Kell, Professor Madeleine Kell as well, to help us with that research, because we find out that, you know, most of the participants, some of them were even more comfortable to talk to other people who are not participants, African participants in the research as well. So those are methodologies that we intend to use. And of course, if there are any other feedback from the participant today, we would be more than glad to hear about that. Now, we do acknowledge there are some limitations which we're going to encounter in this research. And some of these limitations include, number one, that we are aware that the process of finalizing interviews can be very, very, very challenging. And from our previous research, and of course, Ms. Madeleine Kell would attest to this, and she would have a lot of stories to share here. But, you know, people making an appointment and then don't turn up for the appointment, I think that was something that we encountered and we did not expect. So that can be a limitation. So even though we may be looking for all these numbers, that can be a limitation that we have to acknowledge. Another possible limitation that we have is that some of these interviews might not grant us an interview at all. Some may not even willing to participate, no matter what we do, no matter what incentive we give them to participate. Some might just choose not to participate at all, and those people might be the ones that we really want to talk to. But again, if they choose not to participate, there is not much we can do, and that is a limitation we have to acknowledge, and we know that from our previous research as well. And the third one here is that this study will also consider a case study limitation, or it is limited in the sense that it's going to focus in two regions. It's going to focus here in the NT because we have two of the researchers based in the NT, but also it's going to focus in Western Australia because again, we have another two researchers who are based in Western Australia. And the other reason we choose these two areas in particular, because again, these are the areas where we have a lot of these professional skilled migrants in the NT and in Western Australia are residing, and we hope that we'll be talking to them. And the reason we said that it can be a limitation because we have to acknowledge also there are other African professional skilled migrants who are residing in down south who we may not be able to talk to for this research purpose. So what are some of the potential outcomes we hope to achieve from this research? Primarily, the study, we hope that we'll be able to recommend or suggest some modules or programs that will assist, you know, African skilled migrants in getting to their preferred job. I think that is one key, you know, potential outcome we hope to achieve. Another potential outcome we hope to achieve also is to be, hopefully to be able to participate in policy making, you know, and inform policymakers about enablers that we get from these African skilled migrants that will be able to help them and help them get to the jobs that they are looking for. So these are some of the outcomes we hope from this, and hopefully if we can able to identify some of these enablers and get some of these African skilled migrants into their preferred job, that not only affect that individual, but it also might affect, you know, their children, and that will even enable them to get to universities because now they can see, you know, where they are heading. Because what we learned from the previous research, it was very clear some of these students, they were questioning why their parents who are well qualified, who have gone through all the process, are unable to get job in their preferred areas. So we hope those two outcomes will help policymakers, but also it will help African skilled migrants to provide them the enablers that they need in order for them to get their preferred job. So I think I will leave it there because that's where we are at right now. And I would like again to thank you all, you know, and of course all the words you see on there, they are African words, you know. Of course, merci is a French word, the thank you, the English word, but then we have the Fulani, Jarama, and Adobe, also from the Nigerian tradition as well. So thank you everyone for your participation. And of course, we will open the floor now for any feedback, comment, or any ideas that you would like to